Northeast had started to share with the country that one of the goals of this administration is to be able to find meaningful ways to be able to incentivize our civil service so that they always give of their best. That they're able to find ways to benefit from when they create the conditions for prosperity for the nation. That work should not go unrecognized. And I want to urge that this is something that we must begin to fast track. That as we are seeking to transform organization by organization, unit by unit, critical to the well-being of Barbados, that we find meaningful ways to incentivize the team so that they participate in the prosperity they create, but also that they are acknowledged and recognized for the prosperity which they bring. Because at the end of the day, they're a critical part of what enables every Barbadian to have the opportunity to live a good life. My generation lived a good life. The current generation that was here with us this morning, Mr. Speaker, their life is going to be more challenging because we are in more challenging times. So it means that we have to transform, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of our children, that we are able to find a way for Barbados to craft economic prosperity that will allow those children to dream, to grow, and to see come to pass the things that they desire to do with their lives. This is the promise that we want to make to the next generation. And I want again to thank you, through you, Mr. Speaker, the team from Customs, their leader, their minister. I want to thank you sincerely for this work. And hard as it will be, because it's not going to be easy, I want to ask you to continue to persevere, to show Barbadian excellence in getting us to the tape, that we can deliver on the promise to Barbadians, that we will provide them with a better life for our people. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
I am member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few words as always. I am coming to discuss with the public, maybe from a different angle, being the simple mind that I am, as the honorable member for St. James Central said, maybe I'm bankrupt in understanding. But searching myself, the first thing I think of, and indeed my constituents, I had a short poll that I thought of when I hear the word customs, is fees and how hard it is for the average man to bring in items from overseas. Yes, we dealt with missing items in customs. We dealt with that, and I'm satisfied. We dealt with the IT of it, the Asikudo world, which I myself, unless I'm working in customs, really don't get. I understand it, but I never worked in it, so I wouldn't know too much about it. We spoke about the ease of business for people overseas and here. But there are issues that I want to bring up that are of importance in my constituency. I want to bring it down a little bit to my level, so to speak. One of the first things I think of when I hear of customs is the speed of processing or lack thereof. I'll give you an example. I ordered some clothes for my little girl. It took 2 months to clear. I ordered them a bigger size. It took 2 months to clear. She got 2 weeks out of them by the time it got to my house. These are concerns of my constituents as well. The other thing I think of are the duties. Barbadians have reached the stage, they've been there for a while, where we no longer enjoy the privilege of being tourists overseas. We no longer enjoy a restful vacation. Vacations are now for shopping because of the cost to us when it comes to buying everyday items for use. We have now converted vacation time to work in terms of shopping for goods. And this applies to things like people go away now to shop for weddings and for parties and for school, to bring in book bags, to order them online. And the first thoughts that they have is how much duties I will have to pay. And it's hard, especially with a credit card. I know the duties, the cost of living in Barbados Obviously, yes, COVID is one of the reasons, but for years, the cost of living in Barbados has been fairly high. So I did some checking and found out that basic items that we use on every day, everybody in this room use them. For instance, I found out personal items like soap, medicated or otherwise, 40% duties plus VAT. Toilet paper and paper towels, 20% duties plus VAT. Diapers, 20% duties plus VAT. And then we move on to clothing. Clothing for babies, and the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central, I don't think he was right in saying there are no duties. That is 20% duties on diapers plus VAT. No problem using cloth diapers. I've used them myself, but the convenience is important for our mothers and fathers out there. Clothing for adults and children, T-shirts. Clothing for adults and children outside of T-shirts, T-shirts 60% plus VAT. T-shirts 115% plus VAT. These are things that affect my constituents. Things like fruits and vegetables. We're in the era now when we constantly speak about non-communicable diseases and the importance of eating healthy to prevent these, to ease the load on the hospitals and other healthcare institutions. But on checking, I'm seeing things like frozen vegetables and canned vegetables, 20% duties plus VAT. Onions, 216% duties. Tomatoes, 119% duties. Mr. Speaker, these are things that concern me. I know, yes, we are working for customs to make the population more comfortable, to bring jobs and everything. But at the same time, people still have to live and eat. This is where, in my view, we need to push things like everybody in here says, like manufacturing. We need to push things, and I'm sure the Honorable Member for St. Philip South is working assiduously on getting agriculture back up and running properly. Things like canned meat, sardines, for instance, and tuna, the healthiest size of the canned meat, 5% duties, no VAT. And here I have to put a plug in for the women. Sanitary products, well, there's no duties. There's still a 17.5% VAT. These are things that are necessary. They're not privileges. They're necessary. But how do we correct this? Yes, I spoke briefly, I mentioned agriculture just now. I'm pushing the agricultural sector, and this involves education. Barbados is still in a phase, in my view, where we think agriculture is menial, beneath us. I've had the experiences of teachers close to me who attempted to bring agriculture into the outdoor classroom, and many parents look down on it, saying that's not what they send to school the child to learn. But the truth of agriculture is where it's at. For the young people phrase, it is where it is at. We need to change the mindset by way of education of our children in terms of where to go with agriculture, what agriculture can offer, the opportunities it can offer. First step, position education, that we are basically ready to take on the task of increasing agriculture and manufacturing. Research and development, we need to use our people. We've pushed out university graduates, not only from UE, but from all over the world. And it's time that we use these people, if we haven't been, or to increase the use of them, to come up to do the research and do the development in terms of what the overseas market needs. We know that the overseas market loves our Barbados rum. There must be other products that we can use for the overseas market. We need to do the research and development on that in those areas with respect to manufacturing. I remember when I was young, and I made it my business to learn it as I got older, but you see that thing called smocking that raised many of our children? That was one of the most beautiful items I've ever seen in terms of clothing. What has happened? I think the mindset is not good enough for the outside market. We just welcomed into the IDC, I think it is, a young lady who does crocheted clothes. And we all know that one was sold to Rihanna or given to Rihanna as a gift. These are things we need to capitalize on our people. But that being said, we need to make it easier for them. We need to give them the know-how. That's where the IDCs and those come in. We need to give them the order how to reach the overseas market, what is needed for the overseas market, concessions, duties for bringing in items for manufacture, make the importation of raw materials easier. Because right now it's easier and cheaper to to buy sugar from Guyana, and I admit to doing it, I'm ashamed to say it, to buy sugar from Guyana than having it here, sugar that we produce and we can trust. Make it easier for us to support our local market, ergo the international market. Innovation. I recently met a gentleman, I have known him for years, but he recently came to me with what I thought was a fantastic invention of his, a watch. And he even got the okay from the Swiss government, not the government, a Swiss company who was willing to produce the prototype for him. But the funding is proven difficult, and this is something that I can see, just like our Barbados rum, to benefit the island. Something as fantastic of a prototype of a watch that the Swiss can accept and run with. These are things that our people have in our minds, and we need to understand and respect the value of their inventions and so on. Also, the issue of giving the small businesses timely VAT returns. The truth is, many of us, well, not from maybe pharmacy perspective, many of us depend on VAT returns to actually function, to roll over so that we can buy things and spend them and produce them and get people to buying them. Those are issues we need to look at. Yes, the Honorable Leader Opposition brought up the safety of the customs officers. I myself have heard first-hand stories on that with respect to finding things like guns and drugs in containers that were inspected off-site. And the truth is, the fear was the person who was named, or the people who were being named in owning these containers, these shipments. The perception was, how do I fight somebody that is perceived to be more powerful than me? So a customs officer who has her children to feed or his children to feed will almost certainly weigh the pros and the cons. Do I risk my life in reporting this fellow, or do I let it pass? These are real issues we need to deal with, the safety of our customs officers. But I won't keep you long. Those are some of the things that came to mind when I spoke about customs, and I do understand where we're going with this, and I think it is for the better. But we need, in basically wrapping up my 2-minute speech, we need to get the Barbadian public to understand that our products are just as good as or better from anything coming from the overseas market. We have businesses, if I may say so, Mr. Speaker, Pine Hill Dairy producing some of the best juices, and our farmers producing the best milk that you can find anywhere in the world, really. Places like Boycott Ice Cream, you could hardly find them better, and they have managed to break into the overseas market. Ham, our hams are famous in Canada, but believe it or not, you could find hams that we make here cheaper in Canada than having it here because of the cost of production. We have something called the black belly sheep. Why aren't we looking a little? I think the honorable member, the Minister of Agriculture, is playing with this too and doing something about it. But the black belly sheep, the black belly lamb needs to become worldwide. We don't need to see it in other jurisdictions, and it's no longer called the black belly lamb of Barbados. Rabbit farming is exploding here. Why can't we do it for export? And no doubt the proper port. So these are some of my issues that I want the members of the public to bear in mind, and I speak on behalf of myself, yes, and my constituents, who daily come in front of me complaining about the duties on baby clothes. It's hard for a young mother to buy clothes here, but then the outlet was really to bring it in from Amazon or wherever, but then the duties basically kill them for a piece of clothes that lasts about a month. These things we need to look at in terms of decreasing the duties. I know it probably can't happen now, but the people that are paying these duties are people that sometimes do not have a proper salary, people sometimes who do not work, but they need the items to exist and to live. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's my small contribution.
Honorable for Christchurch South.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker. Please accept my guarantee that my intervention will be exceedingly brief. And I heard much of the address by my by colleague for Christchurch East Central this morning in my absence from this place, and I came here not intending to speak, except that I was attracted to the portion of his speech in which he made reference to what I may call preferential tariffs, certainly in relation to goods of CARICOM origin. And in this era, I think that continues to be significant, since I see myself as an unrepentant regionalist. What justifies customs, though, I think, is the need to feed, clothe, and house ourselves, and otherwise disport ourselves as a people. And of course, we must have the movement of goods, because by local effort, we cannot do this. We cannot produce all the food and goods and the other items that go towards us disporting ourselves as a people unless we import. And I speak, except that I am a lawyer in these matters. I confess to you, sir, that I speak as a layperson, and therefore I will not visit you with the technical language that you may have heard from other speakers. I speak on this issue as a layperson, except that I speak with a deep interest, as I have indicated to you. And what is customs? Why customs? I see it as the regulated movement of goods across our border, and that is to say, into Barbados. And I have had a professional history in this matter. Sometime, I think some 15 years ago, when I found myself involved in litigation against the Customs Department, without apology, of course, and I introduced myself in the study of that case to WTO and what WTO meant, that 1995, I think, agreement between nations which sought to liberalize trade, and which the thrust of which I thought then was to remove barriers to trade and to make importation a lot easier. And we know that that has had its difficulties for small countries. Ideally, if you're trying to create this global mono economy and to make goods cheaper, or to make the access to goods a lot easier, it still disadvantaged small countries. I make the analogy with cricket. It is fine to say that we all face a ball of the same size, but there are countries that have bigger bats. They came into WTO with bigger bats, and they continued in WTO with larger bats, and therefore they remain at an advantage, except that we try to boast to the consumer, the local consumer, well, look, WTO is helping you. It is not only giving you access to goods from the entire world, but it is making those goods cheaper. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, while that obtained, it disadvantaged local producers. I know you expect me to, and I will do it, to remark on the disappearance of many of our local industries. You may know that I'm from Grisette's, and the Grisette's Industrial Park became a ghost town. Apart from the Grisette's Industrial Estate, there was the Harbour Industrial Estate, there was the one in St. Philip, there was the one at Newton, and in recent years you drove by these places and they looked as if bombs had been dropped on them. They looked like a place in Beirut or Gaza. And that, I think, has been as a result of our inability to compete. That has been as a result of the liberalization of trade. So we've had to achieve that balance between liberalized trade and the threat to local industry. It may sound like an old-fashioned view, but it is a view that the furniture manufacturers can speak to you about in this country, that liberalized trade has really hurt them, and it has hurt local industry. And as I've said, we speak of the advantage of price, but let us speak at the same time of the disadvantage of an inability to compete. Now, I said I'd be very brief, and I intend to be very brief, but the portion of the act that caught my attention this morning, further to listening to the Honorable Member for Christchurch East Central, was Section 73 of the Act. And that is more particularly Section 73B of the Act. And I'll read it, Your Honor. For the purposes of this Act, rules of origin means the specific provisions applied to determine the origin of goods and include B, preferential rules of origin established by the community or in accordance with trade agreements to facilitate community trade with certain countries or member states in the same community space. Those words speak volumes as to a new intent against the thrust of the World Trade Organization treaty that affected the entire world. And that portion of the act is a reminder to me, it is a reminder to this country, I hope, that regionalism is still a moral and a political imperative and an economic imperative. I learned that one is allowed to establish preferential rates, tariffs, if you are part of a bloc. And does this not give political importance to CARICOM and to the continuation of CARICOM, and the importance of recognizing that we cannot, I know it sounds like a cliche, but recognizing that we cannot pursue life in the Caribbean as islands by ourselves, that we must do it as a bloc. And we have had examples, or cricket, or carnivals, higher academia, which is to say the UWI. Those have been outstanding examples of regional success. And to that now, we add customs. And I say customs not as a policing department, but customs as a department of facilitation of trade. We also learned that when we were doing the case, that customs is not a place that you approach with trepidation. Customs is a place that you approach knowing the rules, knowing the tariffs, knowing the rates, and expecting that you will be facilitated. I would not have completed this address, Your Honor, unless I remind you that there is still a lot of feeling out there that some people are disadvantaged at customs, and this is not a criticism of the department. This is to explain and to expose a reality that too many of our business people and too many of our small business people believe that customs is a hostile environment. And they believe that not because of the personality of customs officers. I'm the last person to speak on the personalities of customs officers and to do so with criticism. I have relatives who have worked there, so I would not do that. But yes, I have relatives who work there. But it is systemic. It is systemic. The perception has been that persons, I used the analogy of persons with big backs a few minutes ago. The perception had been that persons with big backs enjoy preferential treatment in customs. And I think that is related to the history, not of the department, but a systemic history in which only the well-to-do did business. And that persons who came into business in recent years found themselves, according to their perception, at a disadvantage. They found themselves not knowing, in many cases, the rules and not knowing how the movement of goods should be transacted. And hopefully, with this new legislation, all of that comes to an end. Hopefully, they now see customs as a department of facilitation. They see customs as less of a police officer stopping goods but they see customs as another department of government which is intended to do good by the people. But my main point here is that we now look at customs not only as a national department, but we look at customs as a regional department. And I'm so happy that it gives a new breath of life to the integration movement. It gives a new breath of life to regionalism and the concept of regionalism, for us to understand that Guyana and St. Lucia and Trinidad and Jamaica and Haiti are really not so far from each other. In fact, from New York to California is a farther distance, I believe, than Guyana to Haiti. Yet we have been taught to see ourselves as powers, separate powers in this region. As I've said before in a previous speech, we have been separated by language. We need to understand that language should not any longer separate us. And one of the concerns I have as a regionalist is that we still cling to this term English-speaking Caribbean. And I don't know where we stand, where the customs legislation stands in relation to the non-English speaking Caribbean islands, but I don't think that language should separate us as a trading bloc. I really don't think. Language, it is just a matter of translating French to English and vice versa. So that Minister and Mr. Speaker, I would hope that this act, and indeed the treaty, and the concept of trading bloc transcend the issue of language, and that Guadeloupe and Martinique, which are so close to us, will not be seen as entities distant by language. So yes, I support the legislation. I had no intention of making a contribution when I came here, since I was satisfied with the address, the speech by the honorable member for Christchurch East Central. As a matter of fact, I remarked while I was on my way here in my car that it sounded as if I was present at a seminar. He was so comprehensive as he moved from part to part of the act. But admittedly, the portion which caught my attention was the portion which referred to CARICOM. And I would like the public to be aware that this legislation promotes in a very real and substantial way the idea of CARICOM, the idea of regionalism, as I've said, as it has done with other areas of our life, not least of all our music, our culture, the arts, and it does this within the very bedrock of social life. That is to say, at the level of the transfer, the movement of goods. And really, there's a sense in which that is the foundation of all life, or need to consume goods. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you for allowing me this shortest of interventions and to say that I support the legislation, and I hope that there will be no collision as between this act and the WTO, and I hope that there shall be no future collision between business people of all strata, that there shall be no future collision between business people and a regime of customs. I am obliged to you, Your Honor.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank all honourable members for their contributions, and I'll certainly be very brief, sir, in my conclusion. There are just a few things I would just like to raise just in response to a few comments. As it relates to a strategy for growth, sir, and I've been at pains, as well as others, to indicate that a lot of what we have been doing in government is intended, from the reform perspective, really is to focus on efficiency and removing where time is an issue, to be able to help reallocate resources to actually dealing with production. So the honourable member for St. James Central, when he went through the example that he gave with respect to the time that people take to do other things other than dealing with getting on with their actual business, These are some of the soft reforms, if you like, sir, or the soft impacts from the reforms that actually helps to propel growth within the context of the sector. So unless you deal substantively, sir, with the structure of government, which certainly in this case, customs and the other regulatory agencies we are working to so do, that this forms one part of how we will be able to trigger growth, because at the end of the day, if people are not spending time waiting in line, moving around the country, even though, sir, some may argue that the revenue from the fuel tax may be of a benefit, the reality is, sir, that we don't want that time to be wasted with respect to administration, because that too adds cost to the process. But outside of the actual reforms, as you know, sir, the doing business framework that we have been undertaking across the length and breadth of government, and very shortly the public will see, as I mentioned during my opening statements, that the puzzle pieces are being put together, sir, and those puzzle pieces, I hope the Honourable Member for St. Michael West will be able to recognize the growth when the puzzle pieces are all put into place, sir, and the execution is being done. It is important to recognize that we come at this from a very serious, from the perspective that the serious actions that we have taken to not just look at how government is financed. I hear the Honourable Member for St. Philip North with respect to the perspective that certainly my constituents and all of our constituents experience. The way to get out of this, though, Mr. Speaker, the way out of this is certainly the very growth that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has spoken to, and to the extent then that, Mr. Speaker, that we are able to actually trigger a level of income for all of our constituents to be able to navigate what certainly has become a very dynamic environment. As it stands at the moment, given the COVID situation, and as I said, we have, and it is not to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have not, that this government have not, hasn't responded, and I will do so in a different form a little later. But the reality is, sir, that within the construct for which we are providing public goods and public services to the public, the Customs Department, as well as the Revenue Authority, and I would say, and all the other revenue agencies, but these are the two critical ones. We have to be capable, sir, of financing the public policy that we're executing. One could argue that this tax is too high or this is too low or whatever the case is, sir. My perspective is that we have to refocus our attention to the quality of services that we're getting from the government, given what is being expended. And as part of Barbados, sir, that I certainly have benefited as someone from Bank Hall, sir, not too far from you.
The Turkins, to be exact.
The Turkins, sir. And experience all that Barbados has had to offer. I share the perspective that the development of our country requires us to be able to recognize that as we move through our various stages of life, sir, we must recognize that we must bring people along with us on the journey. And taxation, sir, and the paying of taxes is part of that process, simply because, sir, the service provision that we all have received from the government over the years, unless, sir, we are sufficiently independently rich, for lack of a better term, sir, most of us, all of us in the country, have had to share and pull together, sir, to be able to move from one stage of our life to another, be it via education, whether it is accessing health care, or any of the social services, sir, for which we may need to call upon, whether it is, as I said earlier, sir, whether it is those collective services that we may not need every day, but when we pick up the phone and call, we need to know that the fire service will respond, sir, or the police will respond, or whoever within that context. But that is not to say Mr. Speaker, that the government has not been focusing on, one, the quality of the services that are being delivered, because we feel that that is important in the context of the public. But the way that public policy is financed, sir, we have to be very careful within with the conversations that we are having about choosing to pay this or the next tax, sir. It is a balance. And in the same way that we recognize that collecting revenue, sir, is a particularly specialist task. The cash flow requirements for government, so trade happens every day around our ports, and therefore the management of the cash flow, the Customs Department allows for a certain level of cash coming into the Treasury that allows the certainty with respect to what is taking place. So as I said, sir, these are just one of the very critical reform measures that will be undertaken as part of the wider work of government. I do have just a few amendments, sir, just to make in committee with respect to just some little clarity in terms of the bill in certain sections, just to make sure that it is abundantly clear with respect to some, not substantive, but just to provide clarity for which the thing is to be applied. But we are comfortable, sir, that the way and the next phase of this process is for the next mission with respect to customs, sir, is for the further development of the regulations to bring them into 21st century. The technical assistance has already been requested in relation to that, and so as soon as the bill certainly is passed and gone through the chamber, sir, the regulations will come shortly thereafter, such that we have a total framework within which the Customs Department will operate with a modern set of legislation, and that I hope, sir, that with the good work that the Honourable Member for St. James Central and his ministry is doing on the single window, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, sir, dealing with his side with respect to the maritime space. I know that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East is similarly working on the immigration side, sir, such that, and the Honourable Member for St. Philip South working with respect to the SPS legislation and those other pieces which will come to complete the picture, that we really would be in a position not just to modernize the legislation, but really to create opportunities, sir, for Barbadians to take advantage of. And the reason for that, sir, is in a lot of instances, there are a lot of non-tariff barriers that prevent people from doing and accessing certain things. And we are addressing those things so that anybody in Barbados who's capable of producing something will have the framework within which they can, through customs, will be able to provide the verification, sir, of customs and the other regulatory agencies, the verification that allows them access into the market, such that we can literally grow and expand the productive capacity within the context of Barbados. So this is serious work, sir. It is, as I said, one part of the overarching puzzle, but we are confident that once we make these pieces of legislation, we bring them onto the statute books, then we give the private sector the opportunity to invest, sir. We are able to attract more investment into the country because we are able to deal with these matters, and with that, we are then creating opportunities for expansion and for, hopefully, sir, small businesses to become medium and large, become regional in their context, take advantage of the entire framework, such that we can leverage some of the investment that we know that we can leverage in this space, which allows us to be able to deal with a whole range of issues that certainly have been long-standing. So, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to have been able to have this debate today. This is perhaps long in coming, and we are confident that as we move out of COVID, the economy reopens, that once the citizens, all of the participants within the context of the the customs network, for lack of a better term, sir, that wants to embrace the use of technology, the officers themselves, with respect to not just new equipment, but training, are equally in a position to help support the transition, then we are confident that the growth that we are anticipating with respect to facilitation and opening of opportunities, sir, will be there. All that is required, sir, is for the private sector to be able to execute. And so we are confident that this is part of the way forward. And with those very, very, very few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 5:45 p.m.
The question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until 5:45 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 5:45 p.m.